Hello. In this video we will continue talking. This is the second video in which I will talk about Barbara Ehrenreich's novel, Nickel and Dimed, or Not Getting By in America. In this video we're going to talk about Chapter 1 of Nickel and Dimed, and hopefully I can get through talking about Chapter 1 in this video. I have 15 minutes to do so. So let me start by noticing some observations that Barbara makes in Chapter 1. On page 11, she notes that people who are in a restaurant ordering food, because Barbara has a job now in a restaurant as a server, right? Now the people who are having Barbara serve their food, right, to them, rarely notice low-wage workers or ask them for their names. And I've seen this to be true myself going to restaurants, that there are a lot of people, when they're ordering food, it's almost like these servers are machines. Right? They don't even see people for their humanity. They just see the people and say, "Get me my food quickly." You know, they're gluttons, I suppose, in a way. Some of the people at these restaurants, I'm sure, are. They live to eat. They don't eat in order to live, to use that hackneyed expression. On page 14, though, I mean, the author notes that, well, she had to be urine tested for certain drugs, and she writes, and I quote, "If you want to stack Cheerio boxes or vacuum hotel rooms in chemically fascist America," and I think that's quite right, in fact, "you have to be willing to squat down and pee in front of a health worker who has no doubt had to do the same thing herself." And then, in addition, the author notes that 81%, notes a statistic that claims that 81% of large employers now require pre-employment drug testing, and that's up from 21% in 1987. On page 15, the author, right, who has been concerned that she might appear overqualified for some of these low-wage jobs, she writes, and I quote, "I had been vain enough to worry about coming across as too educated for the jobs I sought, but no one even seemed interested in finding out how overqualified I am." And this is true, I believe, right? And the author later talks about why she feels it's true. Because, and I quote, "What ads are the employer's insurance policy against the relentless turnover of the low-wage workforce?" Right? In other words, these employers of these big companies that want to make lots of money for their shareholders and for their corporate management, or even if they're a small business, just for their local management, right? These companies want to build up a supply of applicants, right, in case they want to fire their current employees, right? They can fire their current employees and know that there's somebody they can call up to replace a current employee that might have the audacity to complain about the low-wage salary he or she is obtaining for a lot of hard work. And make no mistake, being a server at a restaurant is difficult. You know, it's not maybe the most intellectually difficult job in the world, but, you know, holding a tray like this, right? Heavy trays going back and forth, back and forth from the kitchen to the tables to serve people, getting their drinks for people, and then their food. I mean, that job is very physically demanding. And remember, Barbara's almost 60 years of age at this time. Now, the author, or Barbara that is, right, as a waitress in 1998, or maybe early 1999, she's making $2.43 an hour. Right? That's what a waitress would make, and what a waitress is allowed to make, right? Now, of course, if she makes less than $5.15 an hour, once you add her tips, right, then the company has to up her, basically make the difference. But, for example, if Barbara with the tips is making like $5.20 an hour, the company doesn't have to do anything for her, right? So, I mean, these are very low-wage jobs now. I mean, an energy drink cost, I think in 1998 or 1999, it cost like $2.50. Now some of these energy drinks cost even more than that. But there's no way on that kind of a salary and that kind of a wage that one can support oneself in any kind of standard of living, and that's just reality. And you don't even really need to read this book to figure that out. It's not easy, especially if you don't have the physical ability. I mean, if you're a physically fit 20-something-year-old man, right, who has the mesomorphic body frame, maybe you can get a job in construction or a job in some physical exercise and be able by that to make a decent salary, because there are a lot of people today who can't perform physical labor jobs as a result of health issues, right? So maybe in such a situation it would be possible. But for somebody like Barbara, who can't do too much really physical labor, her opportunities are limited. Well, on page 20, she talks about how she tried to care about her customers and treat her customers with respect. And she notes how many low-wage workers, right, in fact, generally did care about their customers. They were not all bad people. I mean, even though these people were considered the low class of society, just the waitresses and other almost. They're the rejects of society in a way. The people that couldn't do anything more with their life than become a server. But they still genuinely care about their customers and want their customers to be happy, and Barbara notes that. Well, on page 20, and I just found this an interesting little fact here. She talks about a boy named Timmy, probably not his real name, but she says he's a 14-year-old white kid who busses at night. And I think to myself, he's probably from a low-wage family, right? Maybe he doesn't even have two parents. And what do you think Timmy's busing at night at the age of 14 years old just to get a little bit of money? What effect is that going to have on Timmy's grades? I mean, can Timmy be a good student in school when he's busing at night? And I don't think so. So what's Timmy's future going to be like? Where is Timmy right now? Because he probably, right now he would be about 30 years old. Well, no. 26, 27 years old. And what's he doing with his life now? What's his future like? I find that just an interesting question to ask. On page 24 of this book, Barbara notes how employees, right, at this diner, right, in which she serves as a waitress, how they're treated like little children by the corporate management, right? All these random drug tests and locker searches, and Barbara thinks about how she says it's like middle school again, right? And I think that's an accurate comparison. Although the way middle schools are today in America, it might not be quite so bad. If you think about how children are made to literally get down on their face sometimes when the drug tests happen. That's real tyranny, but. It is a lot like what it'd be like in middle school, what Barbara has to go through in terms of drug testings and locker searches, because there's no trust. I mean, that's the key. The corporate management wants to squeeze every dollar out of the employees that they can, but they have no trust toward their employees. And an interesting statistic here as well, or an interesting fact, is that this drug testing was brought on by the fact that there was some drug dealing going on in this restaurant. But we later find out, at least Barbara later claims, that she found out that it was Stu, right? Stu being the supervisor, who was the one that was really trafficking the drugs, so and using the drugs. So much for the low-wage employees being the ones who are the drug addicts and so forth. It's really the supervisor, the guy who has the power. And of course, Stu uses that power, right? Because he's the man supervising all these women and telling them, don't sit down on your butt, keep moving, keep working, and don't appear idle, right? Stu probably has a sucky life too, and therefore wants to take it out on these women who he's domineering over, right? On page 26, Barbara talks about the less than ideal, in fact, sometimes the awful living conditions of her fellow employees. And she notes a statistic that claims that 20% of the homeless in the United States are in fact people who have jobs, which again is meant, I think, to go against those people who believe that all individuals who are homeless must therefore be individuals with severe mental problems, or individuals who are, using heroin or something. There are people who are diligent employees in America who have a very difficult time affording an apartment or affording a home. And later we're going to see Barbara having a difficult time affording an apartment or affording a home. But the point here is that it's very difficult for these low-wage workers to afford a living on a wage of $5.15 an hour, or even $6 or $7 an hour. And Barbara notes on page 27, and I think this is a very perceptive comment here, she writes that in poverty, starting conditions are everything. And this is a critical point. And what does Barbara mean when she says that starting conditions are everything? And what she means by that is that if one does not have money at the beginning, right, it becomes very difficult, really challenging to raise oneself up. And that's true because one is constantly in a rat race just to pay each bill before the bill becomes due, right? And so these minimum wage employees, they have no ability to put money away. Even money that might help them purchase items like pots and pans, which would allow them to purchase cheaper grocery items rather than simply eating out at restaurants, right? But if you can't afford the original pot and pan, then you can never get away from eating in the restaurants, right? You can't afford to make your own, stews or something, right? You're stuck eating at restaurants, or you're stuck maybe buying cereal. But even cereal's just almost as expensive as going out and eating at some of these fast food restaurants. But anyway, I digress. On page 27, Barbara again notes toward the bottom that these companies, right, the company in which she works for, and many other companies probably as well, they attempt to avoid paying health care costs for their workers whenever possible. If that means they pretend to lose the application and therefore you have to reapply again, and all these little tricks they try to do to get out of paying health care costs of their employees. And the healthcare costs are probably, again, higher because the employees are eating all this unhealthy food at these fast food restaurants because they're not being paid an adequate wage. So it's this revolving cycle again, right? And on page 28, though, Barbara notes that even though these employees are making $5.15 an hour, maybe a little bit more than that at the restaurant in which they're working, they still don't even get free food. All right, what a life is that? I mean, you have this restaurant and these employees who are working there for this horribly low salary, and they don't even get free food. I mean, and on 29, Barbara notes that she would have to, that based on how much money she's spending, even though she's not spending much money at all, she's going to need a second job in order just to pay her rent. Well, Barbara then later shifts jobs. She moves from the current restaurant in which she's working to another restaurant called Jerry's, right? Well, originally she tries to work at Jerry's and at the original place at which she's working, right? So she tries to work two jobs. But she notes on page 32 how it's almost impossible for someone to work two service jobs at the same time, especially somebody who's Barbara's age. I mean, maybe somebody who's like 20 years old, maybe. But she talks about for herself, she just couldn't get herself through two jobs. It was too much work, too much physical exercise, too much physical activity leading to, joint stiffness and joint pain, and just a mind that would have this migraine headache. And then of course you need to take all this acetaminophen and ibuprofen and other, painkillers in order to alleviate the pain of working these two jobs, which of course costs money as well. So Barbara, of course, has to quit working her two jobs. She can't work her two jobs. Well, in the next video, I want to talk more about Chapter 1. I talk about Barbara's work at Jerry's and how that goes. Right. Thank you for watching, and I hope this video was informative.